All right, so let's jump into our amazing team of panelists that I'm super excited to hear from today. So first we have Julie Claveau, who is an astrophysicist and Earth Observation Program Officer at the Canadian Space Agency. We're also joined by Tahani Amer, who's the Associate Director for NASA's Flight Program, and also Nancy Searby, who is the Program Manager for NASA's Capacity Building Program. So panelists, welcome. I'm so excited to have this discussion with you. I'd love if we could start by doing a quick 1-minute introduction on your backgrounds. So Julie, I think, why don't you kick us off here first, and then we'll go to Tahani and then to Nancy.
Thank you so much, Valeria, and thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm really excited to be here. I have a bit of a cold, so my voice is a little bit weird, but I'm sorry. As Valeria said, I'm an astrophysicist. My background is in physics and astronomy, and I'm currently an Earth Observation Program Officer. Before that, I'm at the Canadian Space Agency. And before that, I was Deputy Mission Manager for the James Webb Space Telescope, but for the Canadian part of the project. And I also did some mission planning for satellite operations, the ones that we call RadarSat, the RadarSat series. They're Canadian Earth observation satellites. And I actually did 8 years in the Canadian Navy as a naval warfare officer as well during my university studies, which was a super valuable experience. And I have 3 little kids. So that's about it for me.
Thank you, Julie. We can go to Tahani next.
Wow, Julie, that's very hard act to follow, but I'm so honored and pleased to be with you here today. So I'm Tahani Amer. I've been with NASA almost 30 years. I was born at NASA, so you can tell my age, right? So I've been in NASA for 30 years. I've done from aeronautic work and working in wind tunnels to building instrumentation in the lab until we launch from, I work from the lab to the launch pad. So I've been through the whole process of developing a flight mission for NASA. And now, currently, I manage multiple missions in operation like James Webb Telescope, the Hubble, TESIS, and then we have several missions in development, like Roman Telescope and Sphere X. And I was honored to work with our partners, CANAS, in my earlier life in earth science for a satellite called Surface Water Ocean Topography that was launched 2020. And we're very happy to be part of this team today. And I'm a mom of 4, and I am grandma of 2 children. And one of them was in the hospital yesterday for dehydration. So I'm kind of a little bit on the edge here. My phone is off, but I'm honored to be here with you today. So thank you.
Thank you, Tahani. Nancy, over to you.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Happy International Women's Day. That's today. So great to be on a panel with all these women. Let's see. I am the youngest of 4 girls. I have 3 kids. I have a dog who might bark, and I apologize in advance. And I have been an engineer developing hardware for the space shuttle and for the space station in my past. Then went up to the agency level and did agency studies and analyses across all the mission directorates, and then came to Earth Sciences, back to science, which I was so happy with. And I help people use our satellite information and other Earth observation information around the world. And so we have a training program called RSET, a 10-week experiential program called Develop. We have an international development program called Surveyor, and we have an Indigenous Peoples Initiative. And so really excited to talk about cross-industry collaboration today. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. You all have such accomplished backgrounds, and I love that everybody threw in a personal note as well, just to also show how we can have, these very exciting careers while continuing, to also to be very fulfilled in like our personal life. So thank you for sharing a little bit about yourselves as well. Let's jump in, and Bradley, perfect. Thank you. Never mind. So we can see our wonderful panelists. So given some of y'all experiences, I would love if you could share what are some examples of initiatives, at NASA or also at CSA that have successfully leveraged global cross-industry or cross-sector collaborations. And so we could do the same order for this question as our intro. So Julie, you're able to kick us off here.
Of course. Thanks, Valeria. So I have the questions here. So successfully leverage global and or cross-industry collaboration. So there's quite a few. Like the obvious one that I can think of is the International Space Station, but I haven't worked on that. So I will speak about the James Webb Space Telescope because I have worked on that. So it's really been an amazing experience to see people from so many different backgrounds and walks of life come together with different strengths. And like I said, from completely different backgrounds. And, we think about the obvious, like the engineers and the scientists, but there's so many people behind that. There's people in communications and finance and policy. And so space really is for absolutely everyone. Whatever your expertise, whatever you love doing, there's a spot for you in the space sector. And we can talk also about the needs of academia. So if those that are doing research in universities, so the researchers, as well as the industry leaders, or startups also have a very big part to play. So in building different technologies that we need to actually gather the data and put those satellites, and in this case the telescope, in space. So we need people to build the technology, but to build that technology, we need to know the needs, right? The needs of the community, which comes in this case from the scientific community. So people from different countries all around the world spoke about their needs in terms of research, and then the government took action in identifying those needs, developing capacity within the industrial sector so that we could provide the technology for the instruments and the launch capacity for the telescope. And then it was launched successfully, which was great. And then, so government had a spot, academia had a spot in the beginning, and the industry as well. And at the end, again, it goes back to the academics that are using the data. But there's so many different parts to this when you think, just launching the different scientific instruments on board, and which country has the capacity for what, and, so identifying the goals, the needs, the technology, and the roles and responsibilities of everybody. So really, it was a fantastic project to be part of. And yeah, that's my answer to the question.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. I like that you mentioned both the different types of organizations, but also the different type of skill sets that are required. Tahani, over to you for the same question.
So I really believe in collaborations and building synergy across the whole world. I always like to go to when our astronaut comes and say something called the overview effect, right? When they look at the Earth from the ISS or outside the Earth, and it looks at one Earth, right? One planet that we all live in. And science and discovering the unknown doesn't have any boundaries. So I think collaborations and reaching to different nations, different field, either academia or industry or somebody developing something, technology in their garage, that's what we need. That's what I think is really important. And I'm very honored and excited and work with a lot of missions internationally. And I learn every day when I work my counterpart anywhere in the world. And last year, we in astrophysics, we launched 2 missions, ECLIT, and which was really was our European, and CRISM, which was our Japanese partner. And you can tell, the culture changes, and the knowledge that we learn from each other is wonderful. And as absolutely true, we have different budget cycle, we have different government rules, but we overcome all these challenges so we can get to the science to discover the unknown. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, I love that. It's such a big international collaboration, right? But yeah, Nancy, what about from your experience?
Yeah, thanks. There's so many examples that I thought of, but I decided to pick one that actually NASA and the Canadian Space Agency have worked together. So I thought that would be kind of fun. So we, as I mentioned earlier, work with Indigenous people. And so First Nations in Canada and tribes in the United States. And we our two space agencies work in a network of space agencies called the Committee on Earth Observation Satellites. And we were chatting. We said, we should do something together. And so that from that initial kind of thought, 3 years later now, we have been collaborating together, both Canadian Space Agency and NASA, to work with a Indigenous-led private sector company called Firelight Group, which is from Canada. And then working with them, they run an Indigenous mapping workshop every year. And that Indigenous mapping workshop reaches globally Indigenous groups all over the world. And so they asked NASA and Canadian Space Agency to provide some training on some of our data and some of the ways of using that data. And so we were able to do that. And then the Firelight Group's network and reached out to the group named Winayama in Australia, another Indigenous-led group, and they said, we're doing Indigenous mapping workshop here. Would you guys come here? And so there we were going to Australia now, being able to share, working with a network of Indigenous people from all over the amazing diversity and being able to share the value of looking at our Earth from the satellites. And actually then combining that with traditional ecological knowledge, which, you know, there's huge, rich information and knowledge of our planet over many centuries within our tribal colleagues. And now we have just today announced that we're working with some Indigenous leaders in the Amazon region through my international development program called Searby, who are feeling the pressures of people wanting to use the Amazon forest in ways that maybe don't respect their lands or their rights. And so how do we, again, help them use our satellite information so they understand how to manage their lands better? So that's just an example of, I think, the power of the network and the power of satellite information to really bring people together. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. No, there are so many, like, I think gold nuggets in what you all talked about, because it's so, you know, these large scale projects that require so much like future technology. But Nancy, to what you just mentioned, also looking at some of the knowledge that we've already have and being able to tap into that from some of these like communities. So because these are such like large undertakings that you all are working on, I'd love to dive a little bit deeper. So this next question is for Julie and Nancy. But you know, you've been part of these like large scale, very successful programs and projects. What are some of the components that are needed for a successful collaboration? And so Julie, do you want to kick us off here?
Yes, thanks, Valeria. So I would like to start answering that question by repeating something that Nancy said earlier that I find very important. Is when CSA and NASA were collaborating, the first thing was you were talking about a conversation that happened that, you know, we should work together on this thing. So the very first thing is communication and being part of those networks. So networking and, you know, going to events if there are any like conferences and finding partners. So communication is the very first and the most fundamental part of a successful collaboration. And you have to identify your strengths as a company or anybody that wants to be involved. So knowing your strengths, your capacity, what you're capable of offering, knowing what your goals are as well, so that you can align them with other people. And that goes a little bit with what Nancy was saying earlier as well, that Australia was doing something similar. So knowing your goals and, you know, having those open lines of communication, those are two very important things. And like I was saying, knowing your strength. So what you can offer to a particular project, right? Is it a technology? Is it some sort of research? Is it launch capacity? So everybody has, and no matter what background you're from, you know, no matter which country you're from, you all have something very valuable to offer to any, you know, cross-industry collaboration. So knowing your strengths and what you can provide and contribute, and then is really assigning roles and responsibilities, right? Who's going to be responsible for which part of the project and what you're going to be providing. And yeah, so diverse skill sets, networking, and understanding the community needs as well, right? So like I was saying, for the James Webb Space Telescope, one of the needs and any of the missions that I've been part of, like identifying the community needs right from the get-go is super important as well. So if you have an objective and a goal, you have to make sure that it's aligned with somebody's need somewhere. You can't just start a project or a company when there is no need for it, right? So identifying those needs is also super important.
Wonderful. Thank you, Julie. Nancy, what about from your perspective?
Yeah, Julie and I got to chat a little bit before this, and it's like, oh wow, we're kind of the same cloth. It's great to hear your comments. I agree with everything. You know, one of the things that I was thinking about, that one of the barriers that you have to get around is one that's in the chat: language. And so not everyone speaks English. Not everyone speaks the language of the place. And so how do we be more inclusive? With our trainings, for example, from our RSAT, we do a lot of them in Spanish too, because there's a large population, but we aren't able to offer them in every language. And I think that that's a barrier to collaboration, is finding a way to do the communications. Thankfully, now a lot of these platforms have a translator. They're not always very good, but they at least allow you to follow along. And so I think technology is helping us in that area. But there's another part of language that I think is worth thinking about as well. It's this getting to know each other. I have been working with the U.S. Agency for International Development for 18 years now. And we talk about missions, and we mean something completely different. And we were having this initial conversation years and years ago about missions, and we were like clearly doing this, right? Like we were not at all even talking to each other. For us, NASA, surface water, ocean topography, the SWAT mission was a mission, right? We just flew that satellite. For USAID, they have places that are buildings in places, like in Kenya, for example, where that's their mission. That's what they call their buildings, and they're grouped there. And so like understanding what language people use, and then if you go academia as compared to private sector, as compared to government, we just kind of use different terms. And so I think being patient and humble and listening deeply as you're having those conversations, to really recognize that I can help you. Sometimes you can have a conversation with hands or find simple words that you can understand with each other. So I do think language is really important. I would say there's also understanding what matters to you. So the indigenous leaders we were working with of the Firelight group, what really mattered to them was giving agency to their tribal colleagues so that they could do their own mapping work themselves, right? And so they didn't want NASA to come in and do it for them. They wanted to do it themselves. They just wanted us to provide the tools. So I think understanding what's driving people is really important. And then finally, what do we all know? Still, time zones, right? And so, so some of you are up really late, I'm afraid, and we appreciate that you're doing that. But we haven't quite solved that reality. I did have my daughter, when she was in high school, write me a creative art piece about what it would be like if we all were living on one time zone. But I don't think we're going to do that anytime soon. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. And something interesting you both mentioned was really the need to understand the needs of the community. So that's really interesting, and something that, you know, I've seen time and time again, like regardless with what community you're working with, right? So thank you both for that. And Nancy, you started to kind of mention it as well, but you know, we've talked about some of the successes, but also there's a lot of challenges within this space. And so I want to go a little bit deeper into some of those challenges. And so for this question, I want to pass it to Tahani, and then Nancy, if you had any other challenges that you wanted to add as well, we could do that. But yeah, just talking about some of the biggest challenges that you see when trying to collaborate either, you know, globally or across different industries or sectors. So Tahani, we can start with you on this one.
Sure. That is really a great question. So, you know, every country has their own culture, and they have their own. Nancy talked about the language, right? Not only the language, is the culture, right? Like when I work with the AOS, with the atmospheric observing system, with 4 countries, right? We work with the Japanese, with the European, with the Canadians, and one more I can't remember, but we have to get them all together in the same place, and then everybody have to have it's a puzzle. I call it a puzzle. Everybody has a piece of the puzzle. And at the end, the puzzle have to fit together, okay? From the payload to the spacecraft to the launches. So it is kind of a very fine art to be able to orchestrate all this team together, right? And then too, with being NASA, like kind of the center, sometimes we wear two hats, right? We are the advocates, and at the same time we have requirements, right? So sometimes you have to remember when do you wear that hat or take that hat off. But in the end, we are all there together to discover the unknown, right? To make this mission successful. So if we overcome that, it sometimes makes it easy. So between the language and the time zone, sometimes we have meeting at 7:30 dinner time, our time, and our Japanese colleague like their morning, right? So it is difficult, right? But we make all this because we have common ground, because everybody have piece of this puzzle that have to fit together to be successful. And then too, I really, really admire NASA of doing the Artemis Accord, right? This is kind of a general, how are we going to play in this playground, right? That's kind of my mind, right? So this is rules. Everybody, we cannot, do this thing. So when we have almost 26 nations right now signed the Artemis Accord, and I believe our Canadian friends already signed it, right? So the more people come to the table and understand the rules of the game, right, we all be successful. So that is kind of eliminate a little bit of the challenges, but we are there to do discover the unknown, and we are there to help each other. And we are like, again, look at the overall fact. We are one planet Earth that we're trying to figure out what the rest of the solar system is. And thank you for the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Tahani. Nancy, anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would just add that, Tahani mentioned requirements documents. So as engineers, we like them very much. And space station, honestly, is the most amazing engineering marvel ever, in my opinion, ever, because it is up there and was built by multiple nations around the world, somehow having engineering interface control documents that made it so all the pieces fit together. Oh my goodness. Anybody who's been involved in flight, any hardware development, you put in something and you realize, oop, that hole's just a little off as you're installing the deck in the back of your yard, right? And so NASA can't afford, all of the partners of the International Space Station couldn't afford that. So I do think that a challenge is to make sure that you have common rules, really, of like understanding even how to make an interface control document and how to, and then implement that. And then I think that the other thing that was amazing and is amazing with Space Station is these are agreements that are negotiated, right? Country to country agreements. That takes time. That takes trust. Trust is so hard to get and so hard to maintain and so essential. So one of the things I would say a challenge if you're a new person coming along or a new emerging space agency, for example, sometimes like within the Committee on Earth Observation Satellites, we have a new space agency join. We want that, right? Anybody who's working in Earth observations, please join. But then, the big NASA's sitting around the table, they're not so thrilled about like trying to interact and understand even how to like get their voices in. So I think that another challenge is, again, culture. United States is known for being not shy to speak. And so I think that the challenge for all of us is to remember to be self-aware and sensitive to cultural differences. I think getting to know cultural differences so that you know that you can be respectful in your communications. And then, for me, like dial it back because I do tend to be loud. Thanks.
Thank you, Nancy. Yeah, no, that's amazing. I think you both touched on kind of this like international diplomacy aspect of it. And Nancy, to your point, I've always admired that about the International Space Station. Just historically, regardless of what's happening in the world, you still see these scientists and engineers and everybody, working together. And I think that's something very beautiful that that sometimes could be like unique to science, right? To kind of keep moving that forward. Great. So this next question that I have is for Julie and Tahani. So for our audience who's on the line today, as we saw in the chat, we have folks from, around the globe. and potentially working or studying across, different industries. So can you speak to how they should be thinking about cross-industry collaboration and maybe some initial steps that they can take when they're wanting to collaborate with others? And so, Julie, we can start with you here.
Thanks, Valeria. Okay, how can we think about cross-industry collaboration? So I personally think it's absolutely necessary and fundamental, especially when we're talking about the space sector. Just to give a couple of examples, like right now, I said I was a program officer for Earth observation at the Canadian Space Agency, and one of our primary objectives, amongst many others, is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So they're, if you don't know of them, go and check them out. Really looking to have an impact on a variety of different goals that are global, and space is super important for that. So if you look at climate change, for example, you can use data that is open sourced and available to everybody to identify different things, right? And it's by working together globally that we're going to solve these challenges. And so, this is the first step, is identifying common goals. So some of them have been identified depending on, what you're talking about, but specifically to the Sustainable Development Goals. And if you look at climate action, for example, you can use Earth observation satellites. There are many, Landsat, RadarSat, like I was talking about, there's many. And how can we use that, whether you're a scientist in a university doing research, whatever country you're in, or if you're in industry, and how can you collaborate towards those goals? So identifying those common goals and objectives, building a diverse team of people. So within the projects that we're funding, there's people working together, right? And for example, we have the government working with the private sector, working with the research teams. And I'll just give one example. There's flooding in different parts of the world, right? Being able to identify those floods ahead of time and being able to act proactively and being able to mitigate the risks to different communities, that's super important. But you can't do that by yourself, right? If you're, for example, building a technology, you're going to be using open data or data from different countries to be able to look at the different flood zones in different regions of the world so that you can build an application. And that application, again, you have a software, sometimes that's being developed by a research team, and you have a hardware that sometimes is being developed by the private sector. So everybody's working together. And at the end, that technology that you're providing with the application learns from past data for those flooding zones. And this is one example out of a million that I could have used. And if you can see those flooding zones or identify them before it happens, like, a year before, a few months before, then you can evacuate people or you can create different safe zones, right? So it's by all working together, really, and having common goals and objectives. That is super important. Those are the initial steps that you should be taking and that we're taking. Having, like I mentioned, different skill sets, like different kinds of knowledge that you're bringing to the table. And fundamental, again, good communication. We keep saying it, Tahani's saying it, Nancy's saying it, I'm saying it. So talking to people, knowing what's available out there, what people are capable of doing, what objectives people are trying to achieve, and the way you communicate first, like you have to be in those places where people are, right? So if you're just starting up and you're a startup, like identify some conferences or some working groups like Nancy was talking about. There are different places that you can go to talk to people and see what you can contribute. We talk a lot about cultural sensitivity, right? So it's cultural sensitivity when you're talking to other countries, but internally to your organization as well, right? Different groups have different ways of speaking. If you're talking to somebody from policy as opposed to somebody from communications, there's somebody like a scientist or an engineer, even scientists and engineers sometimes don't talk the same way. So those cultural differences from like different backgrounds, it can be different academic backgrounds as well. The trust as well, super important, building that trust. And it's talking to people. Again, the trust is built on communication. And if you communicate and you try to understand each other, like Nancy was saying, mission can mean something completely different to two people. If you seek to understand what the definition of certain words are to other people, you build trust because they feel understood. So building that trust is also super important.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, it sounds like everything, or a common theme, right, is this like aspect of like trust, communication that really stems from just like respect that we have for like our fellow colleagues. Tahani, what about from you here?
So thanks, Julie. I think Julie covered a lot of territory regarding this question. I would like to bring two dimensions to this. One dimension is uh, either the academia or the industry or the government or the agency. Everybody need to know their strengths, right? What I am strong at, what I am good at, what can I bring to the table? That's one. The second thing is you understand where are the gaps, right? That you can utilize your strengths. So you have it's like a marriage, right? You know, you have to have compatibility. You cannot partner with somebody, or you cannot do something and there is no compatibility. There is strengths and there is a gap. So you have to bring something to the table and you fill that gap. And I just want to give you just a small example. We are working in astrophysics right now is habitable work, which is coming up with a whole new telescope, and to be able to another one is similar to James Webb. And we have a decadal survey that's the academia and the people in the field develop that. We have over 800 people right now just for pre-formulation study. What does this really mean? We don't even know what this look like. We don't know what's the instrumentation gonna look like. But we got everybody across the globe. Can you imagine that? Imagine you managing these people, right? Different culture, different language, different priorities, right? So it's a challenge, right? But why is it all coming together to talk about it, to build something that never done before? And that is the element of inspiring people, right? So we're talking about strengths, talking about the gap, but don't forget everything we do for NASA or any space agency, you're really inspiring the rest of the people in the earth, right? Because look around, there's nothing there to inspire other than science, right? And that's why we love to being at NASA and inspiring other people. And that's what I really think that's important to be able to know your strengths, understand the gap, and inspiring the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tahani. I love that. And I think that probably resonates a lot with our audience members and just even, you know, the broader like Space Apps program and why we see so much engagement also and appreciate, you know, people like you all who can come in and kind of help inspire people currently doing the work or also the next generation. So the last question I have for you all, since, you know, you've all been a part of Space Ops in one way or another, how do you see NASA Space Ops Challenge and also the Space Ops Collective, which again is this community here today, as avenues for establishing or strengthening collaborations? And maybe Nancy, we can start with you on this one, and then we'll go to Julie and Tahani.
Sure, yeah, thank you. Yes, I have helped write challenges. I have helped participate online during the challenges. I have judged challenges, and I'm always amazed at really the community that's created. You're able to join in. It's great to see teams forming from places that maybe don't know each other. They offer to like join members to join them. And so you're really providing an opportunity to do these things that we've just talked about. Figure out a way to collaborate with someone you don't know very well. Find it, you know, I guess we've given the project so that, you know, you don't have to like find that common interest. The common interest is to win, right? And like do the best project you can in the amount of time. And so I think that for me, the Space Apps Challenge gives that opportunity to really play, explore, have fun, all-nighters, people sleeping in sleeping bags. I went to one of the sites. It was just amazing. And so I think it's a great place to really be inspired and hang out with your friends. This new thing you're doing, this collective, I think is a great idea to help people find their networks and connect longer term. So in my work, WhatsApp is the tool of choice in many places I work around the world. So if you're on this thing, please take the opportunity, set up a WhatsApp channel with whomever you like or whomever you think. And you know what? I have WhatsApp channels from 2015. We're still popping in notes to each other. It's actually an International Women's Fellowship cohort, but we just celebrated the International Women's Day together. So like you just get to know people and like care about each other. And WhatsApp is an example of a way to have a channel to really just keep the momentum going. Another thing I just want to say is, look, I am me. I have a perspective. I don't think like people who are around the world and have completely different life experiences. And so innovation comes from that other worldview, that other skill set. So I think there's just such potential. And look, our planet needs it from this climate perspective right now. So I'm really excited about, the potential of ad hoc creative combinations of people who maybe would have never met each other. And the little silver lining of COVID is that, look, we're pretty comfortable doing this now, right? So I think take advantage of the technology and connect.
Thank you, Nancy. Julie, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so like Nancy, I've been involved with Space Apps for at least five or 6 years now, and I've done practically everything, as well, like Nancy was saying. I've judged, I've created challenges, I have been in the chat, mentoring people and answering questions, and on site as well. I've been on site quite a few times. And it's always such a phenomenal experience. Honestly, I will continue to contribute and be there. I have made some, friends that I keep communicating with myself, and, people like students that are now working with me at the Canadian Space Agency. And I've even seen there's a company that has now won a competition in my group, because the funding opportunities are open competitions to everybody. And one of them that won is a team that I mentored like 5 years ago in Space App. They created their company from their Space Apps Challenge solution. And I didn't know it. I was like, what is that name familiar to me? And then when I saw the people, this no, get out. Like, it's like, so really, like, these are people that came together. It was a multidisciplinary team. It was absolutely phenomenal. There was a few students that were still in their undergrad. There was one person that was already working at a company, and he was like, well, let's just go to the Space Apps thing and meet some new people. And then they paired up together, and then they built a startup company from their solution, because they ended up winning, I think, the nationals, like Canadian national. And yeah, so like just seeing people and building those relationships that can potentially grow to a startup and eventually to a bigger company, or just, that can end up having a job later on, or having something to contribute. And, I've seen little kids, like I've seen like 8-year-olds and 12-year-olds come and like try to like solve a challenge at their level, which was excellent. I've seen, people that are in communications, and they come and they contribute. What they will contribute to a team is the design and the presentation to communicate with the challenges, because oftentimes people will think, oh, I need to know how to code, or I need to be like a scientist or an engineer, and if I don't have that, I can't contribute. But no, like, if you're a team full of engineers and scientists, at least from what I have seen, you will have, a back-end code, but you won't have anything to present that people are actually, that is tangible for the commoner, like everybody, to actually understand. So having those different skill sets is super important. And I've made links between people as well. When I see teams or people that don't know how to contribute, they come, but they have no team. Some people come, they already have their teams. Other people come, they find people, they talk, they find teams, and they find new friends. And then we try to mix match them together so that they have a good end result, and provide mentorship. So if you're a student and you go, and again, it's not only students, I've seen people from all different age groups, like, as a contribute, and it's absolutely phenomenal to see people come together. I've seen people on the chat with team members that are in another country as well. So that's been fun. It's everywhere across the globe. So you could find, travel opportunities, so you can go visit your friends globally. Yeah, it's been absolutely phenomenal being part of that. And I absolutely encourage everybody to do so, because we need everybody in the space sector.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. And thank you for sharing about that team that was a winner and continue with their project. We always hear examples like that And it's amazing to just see how people continue with their work after the hackathon weekend. That's very inspiring. So thank you for that. Tahani, over to you.
So I really wanted to thank the NASA apps team. They really, really work hard. When I see him in the hallway, I turn around. I know what he's gonna ask me, right? They're gonna, okay, you have to come up with the challenges here, right? But you know what? It is not their full-time job. It is part of their job. It adds on to your job. So you can tell you how much they love doing this. All Nancy and Julie, that is not their job. It's add to. When see how much they're excited to talk about it, we all like that, right? When we work for the NASA space apps or the collective, and I really think it really it's helped different part of the world to look at our challenge and really humble us to get answer from anybody in the world, right? So that is kind of interesting. I've been with NASA space apps for 12 years. I've been, I'm the Egyptian guest speaker every year, right? They give me guest. So sometimes I send it to the 9th floor to give a talk, and they have some kind of a video and send it to them so I can give them diversity. But I really tell you, they are really excited. The teams are really excited. And then for them to say, I work in NASA space apps or I work in the international space app, it means a lot to them. When they put it in their resume, oh my God, did you really do that? I mean, even if they didn't win, right? Just forget about winning. That's kind of just doing it and committed yourself to do something really beyond, especially the country like third world country, right? This is amazing. Like when we have so many of them campus here in the United States, understood, we all love science and engineering. But when you go to places that you don't even have running water and they do these apps, my hat off to them, right? So it humble us as human being as a whole. And then too, doing the judging is very hard because all of them are winners. If you submitted something to the space app and you tried it, I consider you as a winner, okay? Because you really tried. That's one thing. And the other thing, the collective, wow, we're getting so smart. We're doing tangible thing from the apps. We're learning, we're building synergy. So it is really a wonderful thing to do. And I always encourage, everywhere I talk, I encourage people. I just have a talk this morning in a newspaper, and they were saying, how can people don't work for NASA, involved in NASA? I said, NASA space app. Just get involved in that, and you don't have to be US citizen, you don't have to be, a scientist. You just find a challenge and work on it. And actually this year I was lucky. One of my challenge that I put, it was a winner, right? And I was really excited about that, and I was really happy for the team that did it. So it's really, we get a self-satisfaction in this too. So when I see my friend coming in the hallway, say, Tahani, what's the new challenge? I might not turn around and maybe shake his hand and I said, I'm ready. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Tahani. Yeah, I mean, space apps wouldn't be possible without our subject matter experts. So we're always so grateful that you all take the time, because I know that's a huge reason why people want to join, right? They admire just what you all have done with your careers. So yes, thank you always for taking the extra time to put into these projects. And so we're going to transition to Q&A now. I think we'll have time for a couple questions. This is, kind of up for grabs, whatever, if you want to answer it or if you want to skip. But the first one that we have, which was mentioned a couple of times already, that given it's International Women's Day, any advice for women interested in working in the space industry or any related field? And again, this one, I'll open it up to see if anybody would like to take this. Julie, go ahead.
Thanks. Let me lower my hand. Yes, so happy International Women's Day to all the women that are here today. Yeah, so I've been to a lot of, I've actually chaired the Women in STEM committee at the CSA, and so I've had the pleasure and the pleasure to see and to speak and to a lot of different people. And I think I have I've seen maybe a different different experiences than a lot of people. And what I did during my career as a woman in the space sector is I just I just did what I wanted to do, and I kept going. Like, and so I never wondered about what, you know, men were thinking, or why there were so many more men than, and I was the only woman. And I never even noticed, because I guess I was maybe lucky, I don't know, but like, because I came with that mindset, it's just, I'm doing what I like, so this is fun. Like, I like math, I like solving problems, I was right where I was supposed to be, so it was always really pleasant. Even when I was in the Navy, like, I was just part of the team. And many years later, so now when, you know, when I was chairing the Women in STEM committee, when I started noticing, I was looking back at old pictures, like, oh my God, I was the only woman. Like, I never noticed. So what I want to say to everybody is just follow your heart, be who you are. If, you know, if you don't fit the mold and you don't fit the standard and you're the only one, just be the different one. And, you know, we're in the space sector, we need everybody. And you likely will be the only one with a specific skill set or a specific background. We're all unique, and probably in every sector. I can only speak of the space sector and the Navy because that's what I know, but everybody has something different. Everybody has different strengths, different knowledge, different things that they love to do. So just follow your heart. Don't look at the differences. Don't look if you're the only one. Just be who you are and bring your best self to whatever you're doing. So that's my 2 cents.
Wonderful. Thank you, Julie. We have a couple other questions in the
So
chat. Yes,
if I
go ahead.
may add to Julie, I absolutely agree with her about your passion. Actually, I have an equation, I call it equation for success, right? And it's really I will put it in a chat here. Is it's very important to do this. Is first, I call it IP cube plus R over T. The I is you need to imagine your future. Is it a woman, a man, or 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? What are you gonna be, right? You just cannot just live one day or another just like that. And the P cube means you have to have passion what you're gonna do, not how much you're gonna get paid. That's one. I keep telling that to my young adults. 2, you have to have a plan. You cannot just sit there and wish for things to happen because it doesn't happen. And the third P is you have to perseverance, because things not gonna work your way. You're gonna have to improvise 10 million times. Plus R, you build a relationship, connect with other, build bridges. And then everything takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. Everything takes time. You have to give yourself the chance to grow and learn and fail and learn again, right? So that's what I will encourage women and other people, to be able to think about this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tahani. Nancy, is there anything you wanted to add here?
I think everything's been said. I think that following your heart and counting on everyone to see you as your whole self. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So I think we'll have time for one more question. Lillian in the chat from Brazil asked about specifically when thinking about innovation and creativity. So how does NASA and also the Canadian Space Agency, how do you value and see the importance in these factors? And again, open if anybody wants to take this one. If not, we also have another question that I could see if maybe, Brittany from the United States, she says, are there any recommendation for somebody who's currently studying environmental science?
I can take a whirl at the previous one.
Okay, yeah.
Innovation and
Julie.
creativity. How does CSA see NASA see the importance of these factors, and how are they applied? Well, I'll take my current role as an example. So we put out, globally, we have objectives, like I was saying, the sustainable development goals, right? So we all have, or at least the countries that are part of the United Nations have those goals. And Canada is trying to achieve some of those goals. And it's the role of the government to kind of lead that. I would assume everybody's a leader, really, but we try to give opportunities for funding so that people that want to be creative and innovative can address those different goals. And so we will do funding opportunities, which are open competitions. And we say, you know, we're opening the door for anybody that wants to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. And so present to us your projects, and they have to be aligned with one of, you know, the, I can't remember, 13 Sustainable Development Goals. Sorry if I'm not saying the right number, please correct me. I think it's around there, the 10s.
17.
Thank you, 17. Thanks. And so the people that will, or companies or research teams that will submit proposals, they have to be creative and innovative, right? Because there's some of the judging criteria for those open competitions. Is this something new that has been done? Does it address a specific goal? Is it, are you adding value to a specific, you know, challenge? And so that's how, that's how innovation and creativity in my specific role right now is factored in, and how important it is, because you never know how we're going to solve the different challenges that the world has right now. And it just takes somebody to think outside the box and submit something helpful. And yeah, it's part of the criteria. And it's not something that necessarily that we have already identified, like, this is how we want to solve this issue. These are the goals. Please propose certain things that would help achieve those goals. And so, yeah, the open competitions are hopefully innovative and creative, and usually are.
If I may add a couple of things for NASA, we have a whole directorate called Space Technology, right? And their job is to really look at 20, 30 years ahead of time, what we're going to be needing from technology perspective. And they develop exactly the same thing. Like Julie was saying, we have we send proposals, and we look for industry, academia, somebody that will be able to solve that. And then two, one example of this, our Ingenuity helicopter that was launched at Mars, right? That's supposed to be tech demo, and that thing flies like 70 times. Amazing, right? It was just a tech demo, right? And it worked, right? So this is the kind of excitement that you don't know what you don't know, right? And that's how you work in innovation and creativity and make something works, right? So that opens the door for a lot of other things.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tahani. And thank you to all of our panelists, Julie, Nancy, Tahani. That is all the time we have today, but I appreciate you all spending this time with us. I know I learned so much. So participants, I see that there's already a ton of emoji reactions. I invite you to keep sharing your gratitude via emojis, or also if you want to throw any gratitude in the chat for our panelists for taking the time today and helping share some of their experience and wisdom.